Hey guys, welcome to Wrench to Drive. This is a quick update on a project I've got on the go here. This is an update to my King of Hammers truck, and if you tuned into the channel before, I made this 3D printed King of Hammers style kind of a G-made GOM clone using the Redcat Wendigo axles and a cheap axial transmission, and I used the plastic chassis and blah blah blah. It actually works pretty well, guys. It did not crumble on first use. Now this chassis that I'm showing you here is TRX4 frame rails, TRX4 transmission and transmission mount, TRX4 drive shafts, the Wendigo axles, TRX4 links, guys. The links work really well. The back don't have to do anything. They fit really nice. The front, the only thing that's a little out of whack is the panhard bar, I believe, and I say I believe because I actually can't find my my panhard bar link that goes with this particular set of links. I used it on something, or I used the ends on something. I'm not exactly sure, but I can't find it, so I had to mock one up, and I'm pretty sure that it is indeed significantly longer than the TRX4 panhard bar link because the Redcat axles are wider. Now the other thing that is slightly out of whack is the upper link, the third link of the front suspension. I had to lengthen that quite a bit, so if you see this project and you're inspired, you want to go down this road, that's the only link you really need to worry about. Well, I guess that and the panhard bar link. If you want them beefy and really strong, you're going to need to make sure that you have a link long enough to scab that together. And I will include some dimensions, but it's basically about 5 to 10 millimeters longer than stock, probably closer to 10. Like I said, I'll do some measurements. Now, as you can see in the top corner there, I am doing up some 3D printed shock mount parts and the panhard bar mount there, and I think these are going to be pretty strong, so I'm not too worried about this thing breaking willy-nilly. So there's the front suspension. You can see that panhard bar mount across there, and all those threads exposed on the grub screws there. Not to worry, that's just because the plastic link that's in the middle was too short. It was just one I had lying around, so I just put this together with what I had, and it's actually not that weak. It could probably run all right with that and not crumble instantly. And that does not show the third link very well, but as you can see, the geometry lines up pretty nicely. It's not a whole lot out of whack. The one interesting thing is you got to run the long drive shaft in the front and the short drive shaft in the back. And I'd say the back one is very slightly too short. I'm actually going to put some spacers inside the drive shaft so that the center part can't slide too far over to one side and potentially strip. I think it'll work all right. We'll see. I'll keep you posted on that if there's any problems. Let's turn that so we can get a nice look at it. So there's the top view of that chassis. As you can see, not too bad. It doesn't line up terribly at all. This is 100% workable. And with those 3D printed shock mounts, for sure you can mount the shocks really easy. If you get some TRX4 Sport style shock mounts, that'll also work for you. So one thing to mention, guys, obviously I'm using these XR247 axles because I have them right now and I wanted to see if the geometry worked. And if it did, I figured I'd share it. And here I am sharing it. Now obviously you can run TRX4 axles in this setup, and you can put some wideners on there and get yourself a really sporty hammer truck going. The only downside, the portal axles do raise the center of gravity, so depending on how you want to drive it, a set of straight axles is potentially better. And oh, the other thing I meant to mention, guys, that front drive shaft, as you can see, it doesn't lean over to the right a whole lot. It does very slightly touch the transmission mount when the suspension is fully compressed, and it does not touch a lot. It's definitely better than the Redcat Gen 8 axles, but it touches slightly. And with the old transmission mount that I did for my TRX4 hybrid running the Gen 8 axles, I did some massaging on the transmission mount, just grinding away at it a little bit with a moto tool, and made it fit. And with this version, 100%, you grind a little bit of plastic off, it's going to fit nicely. There will be no interference, or very little. I mean, little enough that it's not worth worrying about. So if you're concerned about fit, because you've heard me talking about that, this indeed is pretty good. It's not a huge problem. Those axles are pretty much dead center as best as I can tell, and that offset pumpkin is offset enough that it seems to work nicely. And then here's the back. As you can see, those links, I guess not super clearly, but trust me, they are 100% stock. I didn't do anything to those. That axle lines up really nicely, so that's convenient. And in case you're wondering, all these parts, I got them off Jenny's RC on eBay. And the big reason that this is a very doable project, that Traxxas transmission is the most expensive part in this. Well, next to the axles, obviously, but of the Traxxas parts, it came in at like $50, pretty much exactly. The entire chassis worth of plastic was about $40, and this is all Canadian dollars. The frame rails were like 15. The links were about 15 to 20. The drive shafts were less than 20. I bought them quite a while ago. I think they're more like $20 now, but. You know, yeah, it's adding up, guys, but it's not that expensive. And those Wendigo axles, the XR247 axles, were only about $110 Canadian. So all this comes out to about, I'm trying to remember, I think it's about $250 Canadian, so about $200 US. That is not a lot of money. And depending on what you want to do, if you like this sort of thing, it's really not a super expensive project. Now this body here, this cage. The black parts are TPU and the red parts are PLA, and it's crappy PLA, guys, really brittle. And as you can see, nothing is broken yet. And I would say that if you make this cage out of 100% TPU, you're not going to have a lot of breakage, guys. It's actually pretty durable. The worst case scenario is that TPU, the screws don't actually cut threads very well. So the one thing you kind of have to do is make sure that the holes are small, the screws are big, and that they're kind of in there good. What you can do is add a little bit of super glue. It's not permanent, because metal on plastic, that's never going to be a permanent bond, but it will keep those screws in there quite well. So that's something to keep in mind. And if you're thinking it looks a little less than spectacular, guys, basically it's because it's draft quality print. I didn't print this at super nice quality. I just wanted to test it out and make sure it works. And I turned the heat up fairly high so that it'll be strong. And those body panels are actually painted with regular primer, and it hasn't held up that bad, guys. So yeah, so this thing is going to have another life, scabbed onto a TRX4 chassis. And the one thing I have to update is the front body mount, because I had come up with kind of a goofy way of doing that, and I got to adapt it to work with a proper chassis here, which is not much work. So I don't expect that's going to be a huge problem. The back, the frame rails stick out a little bit. I think I haven't 100% placed the body yet, but I think the frame rails are a bit too long. So if you want to do this and make it look really slick, you might want to cut those frame rails. I don't think I'm going to cut them, because at some point I think this is gonna turn into a crawler truck. I've got those Injora TRX4 axles coming, and I'm pretty sure I'll put those in here sooner rather than later. And there's another shot of it, just positioning the body. So yeah, I think it'll look all right. It's definitely not going to be a huge problem. Sorry, that one's a little out of focus. Oh, that one's better. There we go. So yeah, pretty neat, I think, and I think it's going to go together pretty well. I've got a servo mount for the front in process right now. That's because that's the one thing you are going to have a problem with. The front axle sits a little farther forward than the TRX4 one, and the servo definitely does not fit in the stock position. The horn is too far back, totally won't work. So if you're going to do this, if you want to do something similar with those Redcat axles, you either got to shorten those front links, or you have to modify where the servo goes. Because if you move the axle back, you can use the existing servo mount position. If you go with what I'm doing here, the axle will be a little farther forward than the Traxxas axle, and you got to change that servo placement. And the way I did it, I actually moved it physically forward. I didn't turn it around. One of the things you can do with the TRX4 is run a front mounted servo, where the servo is turned 180 degrees and mounted way at the front of the truck. In this particular situation, that's not ideal, because it's the way the body has to sit. The servo's kind of too far forward for that. There's really only one way you can place it. And yeah, once I get this all figured out and put together, and I post the parts, you'll see what I'm talking about. But So yeah, stay tuned if you want to see running details on this, because at some point along the way it will be done and it will be running, probably still a couple months away, I would guess. At least a month. So yeah, that's it for this edition of Wrench to Drive. Stay tuned if you're interested. Like and subscribe, follow, whatever, do the hokey pokey, turn yourself around. Thanks for tuning in to Wrench to Drive, where we ask the eternal question: do you drive to wrench, or do you wrench to drive? See you next time.